Let's give it 30 seconds and get going. I see quite a few trickling in.
And Madhavi's going to do the welcome, but I'm going to say a few words just for a moment, just a few words. And that is thanks for everybody being here. And by all means, turn your cameras on. You don't have to hide behind your black screens with your names on them. So we'd love to see your faces, and it makes our guest feel more welcome. Hey, look at all the faces. There are human beings out there. Joe's easy to spot with his hat. Howdy, partner. And then some people are still shy. That's okay too.
All right, it's 2:32. Let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for showing up again today for our AI forum. So today our guest is Afia Tasneem. You probably have been to her previous session, I think it was last year, when she was working at EAB and she talked about the AI trends in higher education. But today she's coming to us from another entity from Huron as a practitioner. She's now the senior director and AI strategy lead. So as you know, we are also looking at our strategies on our end. So I thought this would be a good way for us to get some ideas from her and what other people are doing in higher education as well. So Afia, thank you for taking the time to join us. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. And this is my third time here, and third time's the charm. So hopefully, this is going to be a good interactive session. Madhavi, Andy, thank you for inviting me again. And here's what I'll say about where we are on the institutional journey on AI. So the last two times I was here, I focused on the bigger trends. We were dabbling in AI, just getting started. But now I think the trend has shifted towards institutions really thinking about holistically what their strategy should be, cross-functional strategy, cross-divisional strategy, and then your entire institutional strategy across academics, operations, research, for some schools, clinical. So that's what I do. I'm going to share my screen, and but I really encourage you, like Andy said, to ask questions. Keep your camera on throughout the session. I would love for this to be interactive, so we're engaging each other, and it's not just me talking at you for an hour. So with that, let me share my slides here and get started. The big thing that I do want to give a little bit more intro on is part of the reason I moved to Huron is I truly believe that what's instrumental is not just experimenting. That's a good start, experimenting, having some pilots, all of that is great, but really thinking through from a leadership standpoint what your institutional strategy should be. So I'm going to give you a few tips, tricks to think about that. But let me start with some bigger trends. What are we seeing in the space today? So some of these are not going to be surprising to you. Students are way ahead of faculty. We're seeing faculty in many places send out many confusing signals. You know, some are outright prohibiting still, while others are expecting students to be using AI. And students, of course, are, I mean, it's 86% that we can document. I think it's 100% undocumented usage of AI. The second part here is around the lack of cohesive strategy. So one of the key things that I also mentioned before is there is a lot of activity, which is encouraging in every campus. I'm yet to come across a single campus in higher ed where nothing is happening. I mean, leaders may tell you that, but I guarantee you it's probably because they have driven AI usage underground. People are using it, they don't feel comfortable sharing with leadership, and that's not a good place to be in. But I think more importantly, we're missing out on the bigger opportunities to really understand people's comfort with AI, how they're experimenting, and then decide what to scale, what to stop, and how to manage the bigger risks. Of course, part of the reason people are not talking about how they're using AI is they're fearful. There is anxiety. AI anxiety is heavy, and it's going to continue to be pretty heavy because of people's legitimate fears of losing their jobs. So we need to think about how do we not, we can't really dispel the fear of job loss, but we can say, look, things are changing fast, and it's not just in higher ed, it's happening across industries. How do we equip ourselves for the future? And that may mean retraining, reshifting how we spend our time. But I think that honest conversation is helpful sometimes, depending on how your people are processing it. And then the pressure without readiness. This is really big because I spend a ton of my time talking to boards, and boards are putting a lot of pressure in every single institution. I mean, not every single, but in a lot of institutions when it comes to AI, because they are also, board members are actively managing AI shifts in their own industries. They are asking cabinet leaders to show momentum in this space. But, we all knew this. Higher ed is messier than other industries. Part of the reason we're here is, and we need to think through budget challenges, data readiness, cultural resistance, all of these things that are that are, I wouldn't say is unique to higher ed, but definitely shows up in unique ways in higher ed. All right. So, but it's not all bad news. There is a lot of pressure, and we have known these longstanding challenges that has been working against us in higher ed, like the enrollment cliff, a tremendous amount of competition, cost pressures, which are higher now because of all the recent shifts in funding. And then we have, I think a new one is the mission need to really prepare your students for the current era of work. We're seeing a great amount of pressure when a lot of your students are out there in the workforce trying to find entry-level jobs and not finding them. So it's a big pressure. Expectations are also shifting. What used to be like Amazon-like experiences is now AI-powered experiences. How are you doing your service delivery, your processes in a more friction-free manner? And then obviously it doesn't help that AI itself keeps shifting. Every day you wake up to a avalanche of new news about features and changes. So keeping up is important and almost impossible at the same time. So how do we manage all these shifts? Now, as I mentioned, these are opportunities as well. I think part of the reason there is so much urgency around AI is we're seeing really big opportunities, transformative opportunities when it comes to hyper-personalized learning, connection support. We now can make better decisions, not just with structured data that was only 20% of our data is typically structured, but now we can process unstructured data that helps us make better holistic decisions as leaders. AI-powered operations, obviously, efficiency is a big angle here, but I would say it's not just efficiency, it's also making sure that our humans are involved in the most value add work, and we're taking the inhuman, repeatable, high fatigue areas of their jobs and putting them into areas that are higher priority, that requires human energy, human connection, human thoughtfulness. AI is terrible at emotions, by the way. So obviously, and then obviously there are a couple more around content creation, knowledge, accessibility, and we knew those. So, despite all these great big transformative opportunities, failure rate of AI initiatives is surprisingly high. And you would think it's like, wait a minute, we use ChatGPT every day. You just go in, ask a question, but here's the thing, most people are using AI like they use Google, like a search bar, and that's not what's going to get you to the outcomes that most institutions are looking for. So when we say high failure rate, we're saying it's not driving the ROI, the institutional outcomes we're looking for. But we know why, and we know what the failure points are and how to make those successful. Obviously, it starts with the vision and priorities. So I'll talk through some of these in more detail, but creating that vision on what do you want AI to accomplish for you in the priority areas for you is critical. So defining those North Stars with measurable outcomes. And then you want to build the technical foundations, which includes data and not just, traditional way of thinking about data quality, accessibility. You need AI ready data structures, which is slightly different. The infrastructure for AI, the platforms that help you get to those to build that foundation. And then the biggest challenge is typically the people culture, the operating model type of work. And that's also very, very critical. 10% of this is technology, 90% is your people and process. So and it takes a lot of intentional strategy to make AI initiatives successful. That's something to keep in mind, and you should prepare for that instead of thinking, this is going to be a quick win. I mean, there are some quick wins. They're not going to get you to the big ROI activities you're looking for. So when we think of institutional AI framework, obviously everyone is going to have some level of that top layer, right? Community-driven exploration. That's great. Everyone should explore in a safe way as much as possible, but don't stop there. Really think about where do you need centralized encouragement, investment in academics, research, administration, and then what are the underlying capabilities that you need to build up that can lift all those high priority use cases up. So the other way we try to think about AI in your AI adoption is really not just your existing processes, right? So a lot of people think of this AI on top layer. So how do I add AI to my current workflow? That's fine, but it will only lower effort per task. It's not the highest value add. So it's a great way to get started. It's not sufficient. Then we have the AI insight. So you have all these technology platforms, all these processes already, and you are trying to figure out how do you lower effort per step. And that's another good one of the good starting points, thinking about what goes on top, what goes inside. But then ultimately, you also want to pick some areas, and this is high risk, high reward type of type of thing. That's the underneath layer, which is you want to ultimately also pick some areas where you're not just stuck on existing processes which are made for humans, but you're thinking about the future. You're saying, yes, I know my processes are broken. Yes, I know we're siloed. All these things are happening. But what I really care about is where do I want to be in 5 years, and what does that AI plus human workflow look like? And then let's work backwards from there. What should our processes look like today to meet that future? So you're going back to the processes, not just adding AI on top or inside your existing processes. All right, I'm going to pause for a second. I've talked a lot. Any questions so far?
So, I have a question.
Mhm.
So, talking about the processes, right? So, I think in your strategy side, right, we need to identify the use cases, right?
Hmm.
So, should we be thinking about the processes at the same time, or do we say, okay, here's what we want to do.
Yeah.
How do we get there? In the future
Yeah.
vision of that, whatever we pick.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. When we think of use cases and workflows, we're trying to understand, okay, where do we get quick wins and some intermediate
Mm-hmm.
wins? And then where are the places where we want to plan for the long run? Because when you want to revamp your entire processes and workflows in HR, let's say, or finance, I don't want to pick culprits here, but you have existing areas, then that's going to take a lot of investment, work, change management. So you can't, I wouldn't recommend doing this across the institution. So for some areas, you want to start with like, okay, good enough. The processes are good enough as is. We want to accelerate with AI. So what are the use cases that will help us go from A to B? Other areas you want to say, okay, look, like this, we're going to change anyways. So let's start now with this one area or two areas. And let's think through the change management. Let's think through the infrastructure in that holistic way. So that's a great
Yes.
question. The other thing I wanted to point out is for more mature institutions, and this is, for example, I'm working with Cornell right now, and Cornell already has a AI innovation lab. They're doing, Andy, you had a question. Let me stop there first.
It was really just to build on the last. I think I have some latency between my response and your answer to the last one. As you go through, I think as we run our organizations, it's when you look at the layers,
Yeah,
the on top. I mean, I might be able to create something cute and fast to go through my emails faster or
yeah,
schedule my day better. That's kind of easy. And there's probably mechanisms to share those that universities are doing. So that's one level. On the other level, on the inside and the underneath, and maybe even on the on top, there's got to be massive investment in people who
mhm.
can actually do the essentially the business process reengineering, to use a 20-year-old term, but doing
Yes,
so with AI. It's almost like AI designers, which are
yeah,
capabilities that none of our schools have.
yeah. Well, that's that's why we're consultants.
Exactly. Right. So as you talk, I mean, it'll be really interesting to know how other schools are doing this. Are they hiring people, consultants to do it for us? Are they hiring their own cadre of people internal to their
Yeah.
schools to do it? I mean, that's that implementation step. It's great to see the layers, but how do we build the layers?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. So some schools do have the talent. So and they are still hiring consultants for other things they don't have the talent on. But like you mentioned, this is a big endeavor, and you have to make the decision based on your existing capabilities, staff capabilities, plus where you need support. And that could be new hires, or it could be short-term consultants who come in and prep your team for these things. So Cornell, for example, that's one of the institutions I'm working with closely right now, and they just hired or they just promoted someone to the vice provost of AI position. So that's a big role. They also have a head of AI innovations. They have CIOs, obviously, CIO leaning in, provost leaning in, and I'm helping that team. And my team and I are also helping that team think through the institutional strategy, design, all of that. So it's not one or the other. But obviously, Cornell is, they're really investing heavily in AI. And we are also working with other institutions where they don't have a ton of talent internally, or they have some talent and they want us to train that talent better or make them more effective. So all of those are things to consider. Iraj?
Yes, I have two questions. One is, could you explain the difference between implementation and adoption?
Yeah, fair question. I think where implementation leads to adoption, but I think one of the interesting things about AI is you don't always need to implement a big solution internally to drive adoption, right? Like, because I think what's happening is you have all these public tools that are the add-on tools. You have ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, and what institutions are doing is essentially subscribing. They're getting enterprise licenses to these tools um, to that doesn't take a lot of heavy implementation work technically internally, but it does take change management. It does take adoption work. So that's how I think I would make the distinction where you're building, and I think I have a slide later that goes into details on like embedded versus new build or buy or for specialized point solutions, and then the broad market tools that you can bring into your environment. Mason?
Uh, Hi. I have a question about how we can responsibly adopt the AI into the system. Because we know, as a person who is working on the AI for a long time, I know there's lots of AI models, but now we have some LLMs and like generative models, which
Mm-hmm.
is still struggling with the accuracy. Sometimes they're
Yeah.
hallucinating, sometimes there's biases. So
Yeah.
when we are trying to adapt in the system, we need to do it responsibly and
Yeah.
ethically to doesn't distort the system like the current system, how we can adapt it in a best way.
Yeah, and you make a great point. AI is nothing new. It's been around since the 1950s, and we have seen robust development in the space way before ChatGPT, publicly launched their solution. So, and when we think of AI, we don't want to discount the deterministic processes we had before either. We don't want to discount other workflow automation tools, which you may need for certain more reliable workflows where you need more reliability. So I think when we think of AI, we're thinking of the spectrum of solutions. We're thinking we're adding RPA to it. We're adding workflow automation where reliability is a big factor. But we're also thinking where can generative AI or more recently agentic AI add value for things that you couldn't do before. And for those, when you ask the reliability question, I'm guessing you're asking, for generative AI and agentic AI. And for that, I'll say choose your use cases appropriately for those. Obviously, people can experiment with these, but when you want to have institutional workflows tied to generative AI or agentic AI that uses a ton of different AI methodologies, you want to make sure that your use cases um, are appropriate for those technologies. That's, I think, the first thing. And then there are other range of things like your data readiness is going to be a huge factor for reliability. Your prompting would be a huge factor. Like hallucination, part of what we talk about is you're not asking the right questions and giving it the right context, which is why AI is making up stuff. It's not 100% that way, but there are ways you can mitigate those challenges as well. Uh, um, I think there are a couple of other hands. Ganapati, you're muted.
Good afternoon. My question is related to the team that develops the strategy for implementation.
Mhm.
In the examples that you gave, you mentioned the Office of the Provost, which is academic affairs, and maybe the president's office. Uh, but you
Yeah.
left out research and creative activities. Typically, the provost office doesn't have a lot of funds to invest in AI implementations, whereas the research and creative activities
Mhm.
division may have some funds based on their income from other sources. So,
Yeah.
why are the research and creative activities people not on these forums or not participating in these strategic discussions?
They absolutely should, and we are having conversations with chief research officers, VPs of research all the time. I think if it were up to me, I would say every single department. There is no place at an institution that AI is not touching. And not touching substantially. So every single division, every single department should be thinking about how AI is changing what we do, how we serve our students. So, faculty as well, the community with our research as well. So I think it's when I mentioned those, they were just, some of the areas, but not all of them. They weren't exhaustive. But I do think, to your point, we're seeing a ton of activity from boards and presidents, obviously, carving out money, institution funds for those activities. From the provost side, I think it's more this we have to confront how AI is changing academics, how AI is changing pedagogy, curriculum, and research. So there is that interest from the provost side. CFOs really care about efficiency and productivity gains we can get from AI. Uh, so on and so forth, right? Everyone should care. CIOs obviously is the connective tissue that should hold all of it together and help with the institution strategy. So I don't want to leave anyone out because everyone should be involved. It's just who's carving out funds for it and how do we manage it at an institutional level. So when I think of institutional AI strategy, I would recommend you to take to take a very disciplined approach to it. So first, really understand where the baseline activities, baseline literacy level, baseline, awareness, challenges, all of that. And then don't stop there. I think many institutions do that part, like they do a survey, they talk to a few people, and it's done. Like, do not stop there. That's just the first mini step. The second step is really thinking through your AI vision and guiding principles. Very important to identify what are the domains you want to focus in first, and what would good look like? What's the, what are the KPIs you're going to measure? And it may not be perfect. ROI has been difficult to achieve because it's such a new technology, but unless you set some goals, you're not going to reach them. So you have to prioritize, focus, set some goals, and then think about what's already happening on campus in a disciplined way. So engaging your stakeholders across campus. These are AI enthusiasts. These are department leaders, business leaders, and do it in a very disciplined way where you're capturing and categorizing your AI initiatives by where they are and where you want to see them go. And then this exercise, this should help you select, refine, and ultimately prioritize high impact opportunities. And then you're also doing readiness and capability gap analysis to understand, okay, like great, these would be great to do, but can we really pull it off from a people point of view or culture point of view, data, technology point of view? And then you're putting together this strategy and governance framework to get from A to B. So discipline and intention are the names of the game here. Did you have more questions? I
I
see
just
some.
had a one follow-up question.
Mhm.
You want everyone to participate, but you know how institutions of higher educations have protected silos. They think only the IT department and the computer science department are capable of doing this.
Well, IT and computer science can drive some of it, but this is a very domain specific. This is very relevant for the domains because AI is impacting HR differently from finance, differently from IT. So the use cases should come up from every single domain. And we do this every day. Like I'm doing focus groups and interviews and to really pipe up that, to communicate that and surface use cases from across the board. We can start. You can pick, I mean, presidents, provost, CIOs, others can pick, leaders can pick three areas to start with, but with the understanding that those are areas we start with, not where we end. It's going to be a journey.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Others, yes.
Can I follow up? Uh, I believe there are two aspects of this issue. One is the research side, how to develop AI aspects of things. Another is how to implement or how to transfer that technology to practice.
Yeah.
Are you aware any offices in any institution has done that transfer part?
Yes, 100%. I think what we are seeing, and I'll go through, like, there is a strategy section where we're talking about, okay, like, what are the use cases? Where do you start? What's the journey? What's the roadmap? But then, yes, 100%, you're going to make a decision on, I'm going to just skip through some stuff here. You're going to figure out, where the chat and GPT interfaces are going to be sufficient for the use cases. And you're going to um, help the institution or different departments who are dealing with those use cases think through how to do that. And then you're also talking about Cloud Code or CoWork, some of the more platform. I mean, some institutions like Arizona State University built their own platform, Create AI platform. I'm increasingly thinking you won't need that with, the shifts in the commercial space, but that's also an option. And yes, you can, and those are going to be more advanced AI tool sets that people need training on. And and they are using those to create their own solutions with appropriate training, with appropriate consultative support that the institution provides. And then we are also seeing production grade AI. Like I was talking about Cornell, they have 40 of these happening in a innovation lab, many of them deployed across campus with good impact. So we're talking about what's missing here is after production grade, there's actually enterprise grade. So for universities like Cornell who are way advanced already, they are doing production grade and then simultaneously thinking about from production what goes into the enterprise grade. So you're not just thinking about deploying a solution that people use, you're thinking about maintain and support. What happens when models degrade over time? All of that need to be baked into your planning and structure as well.
Thank you.
I'm loving the questions, by the way. Anyone else?
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
I have a question about because we are discussing about the AI adoption, and one of the main problems right now is AI governance and data governance. So
Mhm.
who will control the data at the end? For example,
Yeah.
if you decide to use the like enterprise LLMs like ChatGPT Cloud,
Yeah.
basically at the end of the day, they will uh, trying to gather data, process the data, and they have a control on the data at the end.
Yeah.
So I just like to understand what's the best strategy the institution can do to tackle these kind of problems.
So, could you clarify a little bit for me? Are you worried about, OpenAI, you sign an enterprise
Uh,
agreement with them?
any kind, what I'm trying to say, any institution at the end of the day should like establish own LLMs or own models to use like for internal use. And basically, what I understand, different like enterprise companies like ChatGPT Cloud, like hundreds of other companies
Right.
nowadays. Like every day, we see different companies trying to make own LLM for just using for this generative for generative purposes. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the most important question is who will own the data? Who will own this model? Like if we like use our data in this system, are
Right.
they able to how can I gather, collect this data and like use for other purposes? I know like for the AI models, you can say maybe the models doesn't really process the exact raw data, but at the end of the day, they need to have some sort of data text. And the concerning point for any institution, you need to understand what is the AI governance or data
Yeah.
governance, like who it
Yes.
governs.
Yes. So, data governance and management is absolutely key. And that's one of the things we do think of when we think about our strategy here, which is where is your data ready and how do we make it ready? And then how do we keep it secure. So there are going to be, and you can have enterprise agreements with OpenAI, Anthropic, etc., which allows you a certain level of data security. Now, your comfort level may differ. You may still say, okay, like I am okay with institutional data going to these providers because we have an enterprise agreement that, and they have promised they're not going to train our models with it. But it requires a layer of trust, 100%. If you don't trust that, then you could say, for my sensitive data, for example, finance data, some people say like, okay, we're not going to use external LLMs for these kinds of data. But that's also a strategy question. Like you need to decide, where do you feel comfortable with enterprise agreements and what your enterprise agreements currently look like? Where are you not comfortable with that? And where do you need, we're also seeing people develop on-prem services or on-prem data storage and processing because they don't want anyone to access those. But that's an institutional decision on what you feel safe with. And we can provide some options. We can tell you the pros and cons, but that's something that absolutely has to be baked in your AI governance and your data governance work.
Thank you.
Okay, so I skipped around a bunch, but this is fun. So let's get back to the strategy then. So we were talking about, how do you develop this institutional strategy? So you have your vision, you have your opportunity, activity, discovery, readiness, and then the strategy roadmap. And part of what we're trying to do for each of these sections, I'll quickly, highlight some things to keep in mind. So for AI awareness, as I mentioned, you are looking at the holistic range of AI solutions, and that's part of the education you're doing. That we're not just thinking ChatGPT, generative AI here, we're thinking the whole range because we want to make sure that the tasks, the problems you need to solve, the opportunities in front of you are we have a full understanding of that, and we are mapping appropriate technology solutions or AI solutions to it. The next was around this vision, desired outcomes, and principles. And this is really critical as well because it answers the question of why. Why do you want to do this? Why do we have to, why do we want to build, why do we want to add AI to all the messes we're already going through? Like, what is the purpose of this? And you want to share that clear vision with the rest of the university so they understand what your vision is. And then you want to really define the results. What are the value add impacts? What does the future look like? Sometimes with AI, we don't even consider current processes, like I talked about, as much as future processes. Like, what do you want the future to look like? And then let's work backwards from it. And you're also identifying your strategic priorities where investments would be worth it because you want to reimagine it. And then framing the process around and that framing happens with some guiding principles. We are human-centered. These are some of our guardrails when using AI. These are some of the places where we won't use AI. So it's having that upfront conversation at the leadership level is very important to guide strategy or implementation at all levels on campus. Yes, I'm seeing more hands up. Iraj?
It's left from back. I have to
Oh,
remove.
okay, no worries. Okay. So, we did, I'm not going to go through in detail, but University of Pennsylvania, another school we worked with, and they were really focused on their admin ecosystem. There are other schools like University of Richmond we're working with now. Their president appointed a presidential advisory group on AI, and they wanted to look at, they developed these vision, outcomes, and principles holistically for academics, admin, and operations. So it's going to differ by every school on how they want to do that, but that's something that's important to do up front. And then we get into understanding your activity and opportunity space. Like we mentioned, people can be pretty shy in talking about where they're using AI, and you want to break through that shyness. Now, I will say we have an advantage as consultants sometimes because when we go into these focus group discussions with uh, leaders or AI enthusiasts, AI skeptics, we're saying, look, like we're looking for trends here. We're gonna anonymize this conversation. So let us know what you're thinking about, what you're experimenting with, what you're struggling with. And then we also start these conversations. It's very important to start it with the priorities, not AI questions. What do you want to accomplish in your division? Okay, like where are you seeing some roadblocks? Okay, now let's talk about the roadblocks and opportunities in terms of where AI fits into the picture, not the other way around. And then thinking, like we mentioned, like there's going to be people who are doing AI in these different ways. We want to understand where they are in their journey. Who are the ones who are, vibe coding their over the weekends versus just using AI as a search bar. So we want to understand where do we need to upgrade people or upskill them, and where do we need to encourage them to share with others what they're already doing in different ways. Then we come to use case prioritization, and we look at two main things here. I'll also add velocity is another thing we look at, but very simplistically speaking, we're looking at value considerations and feasibility considerations. And on the value side, we're really trying to understand your high volume, repeatable workflow. So not just tasks. It's because if you just augment or automate a task, then everything gets stuck in a bottleneck. You want to make sure that you're choosing workflows where you can automate and augment multiple parts of that workflow. So there is no bottleneck. Things move smoother, faster, easier. And then obviously reach scalability, potential impact in terms of time, cost savings, service delivery. And we try to really take a holistic look, not just efficiency here, because where we're seeing AI drive a lot of value is around service delivery, is around some of those other areas beyond simply efficiency. Ganapati?
See, many institutions of higher education suffer from the sunk cost syndrome, where they
Yes.
have a lot of initiatives into which they have put in some investments and they are under pressure to make them succeed. So this AI comes along, and how do you, as a strategist, convince leaders in higher education to move money from their pet sunk cost
Yeah.
syndrome projects into the AI strategy initiatives? How have you
That's a
done that?
great point. Yeah. And I think it's a tough balance. Sometimes, I'll be honest, we meet people where they are. We say, okay, you've been using PeopleSoft and you don't want to shift and use one of the modern platforms. Let's think about how do we optimize PeopleSoft. Now, obviously that's not ideal, but we have to understand where an institution is, and sometimes they're going through like big changes in leadership and they can't take on some of the bigger initiatives. That's fine. But when we can, we kind of lay out the pros and cons. We're not there to make decisions for leaders. Ultimately, leaders have to own the decisions they make. But we can lay out the pros and cons to say, look, this is what you can get with your current strategy, current infrastructure. And at some point, you may have to shift. The question is, when do you feel like that shift is appropriate for you, for your culture, for your institution? You all know I was at EAB, and we used to say like, okay, institutions should do this and that. And now, I think at Huron we take more of an individual approach of like, let's think through what will be most successful at your institution, because no two institutions look the same, and we shouldn't be so quick to judge either.
Thank you.
But I will say sometimes, when leadership is ready, when people, when the culture is ready, we do these future, like totally unrealistic sci-fi future scenario planning. And what happens is we have seen people shift from incremental thinking to like, oh, cool. Like if the future is that, or if a future looks anything like that, we need some big shifts here. And then it's a fun exercise where we're seeing this is not supposed to be realistic. This is supposed to help you think through what your future may look like and what changes. What are the no regrets activities you need to do right now that helps you move towards that future, not just focus on the present or the past? Mason and Madhavi, both of you.
Sure. I have one quick question. You write approach to prioritization, and I don't see any human factor here. Like, I just want to ask because different systems have this different priority. Like, if
Yeah.
you go to the company, they prioritize like capital rather than human. But in
Yeah.
education, they prioritize humans rather than capital. So what's the metrics we can have here in addition to these metrics to prioritize the, for example, human cognitive load, human health, like this kind of
Yeah.
things?
I think we include that in potential impact as well as so on the value considerations, it's the impact, and that is like human factors will absolutely weigh in there. And then on the feasibility side, it's the constituent enthusiasm. I think it's pretty broad, but what we're really saying is what is the least path of resistance when it comes to your people? Like, are they ready from a openness point of view, from a expertise point of view, from an understanding point of view? And that's one of the key factors that can accelerate or stall AI progress. Madhavi?
Yes, so I think you talked about the AI readiness, right? To see how ready are we to take on these initiatives. So we know that there are quite a lot happening at every institution, right? But we don't know what they are, right? Because they work in silos by themselves. Is there a benefit on doing a kind of a understanding what that inventory is like across the campus to kind of even think about the use cases and all of that stuff, just to see whether this work is already happening, what is happening?
Yeah, so that is the first one, right? You are absolutely going to do an activity, opportunity, infrastructure. So I think we can shift this around, in different ways. There is there is this push and pull between do you start with use case prioritization or do you start with readiness? Because I think one of the challenges we see is it's like data governance and management as well. When you try to eat the elephant at once, you're never going to get there. It's like 10 years we've been trying to do this, nothing's happening. Well, maybe the goal is too big there. So what you try to understand is for most institutions, we're finding it's better to start with these are our high priority workflows, use cases, things we want to do. And then let's figure out how ready are we to do those things? Because if you start with readiness across the board, then it can feel overwhelming to even get started. Richard?
Yeah, so along those lines, there's two reasons. So one thing is a survey of readiness, but there's also a survey, as Madhavi was talking about, a survey of ongoing activity. And the reason to know about ongoing activity is multifold, but one of the reasons is people might be doing things that aren't safe and they don't know that they're doing them, that they're unsafe. They also might be running into barriers and they're doing something really important that we might not think of as a use case and a priority, but it turns out to be really important. We want to invest in removing barriers to that. So can you talk a little bit about like what are the strategies institutions use to capture that information,
Yeah.
not as a one-shot survey, but I mean, certainly it has to start, but in an ongoing fashion.
Yeah, sure. And you're absolutely right. We actually do this AI opportunity and discovery work before we do use case prioritization. But I think one of the key things to remember is, like this looks like a straight line. It rarely is, right? So you're kind of doing this iterative process of like, okay, I understand the vision, I understand the domains. Now let's think about the activity in those domains. Let's think about readiness in those domains. Oh, wait, based on all of this, the initial domain doesn't work. Let's pick a different domain. So there is a little bit of iteration that or a lot of iteration that happens throughout the process. In terms of your specific question on how do you capture, there is no clean way of capturing. And obviously you can do, your AI and one of the things that we do from a consulting side is we start with the data intake, right? We want to understand what are all the systems you use, what are the AI policies, use cases, everything that it can be linked to AI across different divisions. And then we will also do a survey, like you mentioned. But we know that that's a one-time thing. And we are finding that with AI, people don't even know what AI is, so they don't know what to answer in a survey. Like it has to be qualitative discussions. That's where focus groups and interviews and workshops and design thinking is critical and bringing them along in that journey. Because what we find is when you put people together in a group, that's when, and you're guiding that conversation effectively, that's when they can bounce ideas off of each other. They can design together rather than when you're asking, just how are you using AI? Like, who knows? AI is in my Netflix. That's how I'm using it. So that's that. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. And if I can indulge me in one other question, I saw quickly as you were flashing through a slide, you talked about enterprise sandboxes. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen? What do institutions do? We've talked about that. One value there is that, at least the one we're looking at, is that you can have dozens of models available in there. And you've got kind of a flat rate, and you're not having to buy an enterprise license for Claude and for ChatGPT and for Copilot and for whatever. And then as people develop things, you can use that for training, and we can move those into production on a piece by piece basis as we need. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on how sandboxes fit into all this?
Yeah, I think sandboxes were all the charm like a year ago or so, because like you were saying, like we're giving you access to 40 models. Increasingly, we're seeing that models are not the differentiator. So like giving people access to 5, 10, 20 models, yeah, it's, the difference is marginal between a Claude and a ChatGPT at the end of the day. I mean, actually, Claude Cowork has changed the game substantially. Claude Code, so they're special, but the difference between a ChatGPT and Gemini, I would say, is marginal, right? So I think because these companies are competing so hard with each other, they're kind of really close to each other in terms of capability. So now the differentiation is how do you use whatever model is out there. And even sometimes we're seeing, smaller models, domain-specific models have an advantage from a cost perspective than the larger models out there. But at the end of the day, it's about how you use the models, and that comes back to your strategy, to your use case development, to your embedding into workflows or designing your processes and workflows based on capabilities that are accessible through multiple models.
Yeah.
But one or the other doesn't make much of a difference. Now, what is helpful from a sandbox perspective is the security. So people feel safe to experiment. Now, you can do that you can create like Arizona State, you can create AI platform and give people access to institutional data that they can use in those models to use. And that's great. You can also do enterprise licenses, but obviously, if you're doing enterprise license for ChatGPT or Gemini, that's a very different offering than if you are able to offer Cowork or Claude Code, which are just more useful in getting tasks done and automating and augmenting workflows, but they're more expensive too. So I think it's there is no one size fits all. We would you would have to really understand what are you looking to accomplish, what are your use cases, and then figure out how do we define a solutions approach or a AI infrastructure approach based on that. It's not the other way around.
Hmm.
And I'll say we have also seen institutions who have those sandboxes in place, or even like um, there are some institutions who have, made it mandatory for all their IT staff to get an AI certification, but they're still lacking in use cases because people knowing how to use it is not the same as like knowing where to use it. And that's where I think a combination approach, you need the back and forth between both. Not that literacy is not important, it's like critical, and more people learning how to do the work is going to accelerate, but it's not one or the other.
Yeah, I think all of that makes good sense. I think part of the thing that we're working through is also the cost issue
Yeah.
and also the changing landscape. So even if we could manage the cost to get a site license, enterprise license, and make sure everybody had access, which is a non-trivial
Insane. Yeah.
economic task, we might pick the wrong one. And it might turn out that we don't like this one as well as we thought we did because now things have changed. And so, from our perspective, like a sandbox is a good place to start because we're not being charged for what we're building in the sandbox, only what we move into production. And we can do that based on use cases where we prioritize things. So we can say, we
Yeah.
want people to build these 5 things in these 6 areas. We'll fund those as we move through. And over the next year, everybody can learn the literacy and can learn to build things. We can test
Yeah.
these things out and understand what the economic impact would be to roll out X, Y, and Z. And so I just didn't know if this is a kind of an approach that other institutions are still
Yeah.
considering.
Yeah, lots of institutions will take that approach, and it's a really good approach. Nothing wrong with it. I will say that, sometimes it's a bit nuanced than that because there are institutions who have negotiated agreements with Anthropic, for example, for token-based use, not per seat. So I wouldn't take like literally what they're saying on their website as gospel. It's really figuring out, okay, like sandbox, here's the approach to the token-based model. And you're absolutely right. Like if you can avoid paying per seat and paying for actual usage, that's always going to be a better strategy. And maybe Sandbox is the way to get there. Maybe, Sandbox with maybe a particular provider um, who's going to be just updating their offerings and more user-friendly would be a way to get there. On the, are we going to choose the wrong one? I'm not worried about that because when you look at like context engineering, prompt engineering, it's very similar to how you would use one versus the other. So I think we can figure out what applies, like a model agnostic, platform agnostic training strategy, development strategy that you can switch one out for the other in the future. But Sandbox is not a bad idea. I'm just throwing out like options. It's not one or the other. It's you can go through this in many ways that are good.
Afia, just letting you know it's 3:30. If you
Yes.
are able to stay back, I'm sure others will want to stay back. So I'll leave it up to you.
Thank you so much. I'm able to stay, but I want to be respectful of your time. Obviously, I'm going to put my email in here, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I loved answering all the questions you had in the moment, so thank you.
So maybe we'll stay for a few more minutes if anybody wants to have other questions.
I know this is a big, tough journey. We're doing it with many, many institutions, and things are progressing better than we thought. So, just to give you some hope that this is not an impossible journey, although it does take some intentionality and planning. Thank you all. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for taking the time again. It's almost like I'm going to bring you back again next year, right? These conversations are great to have, and we have talked to so many people about strategies, and seems everybody comes from a different lens, But that's why it's very, very helpful for us to hear from people who are actually putting into practice as well.
Yes.
Thank you again, and thank you for all the questions as well. Next month we do have one of our own, Emily Oliver, who will present. I cannot remember the topic, but I will see whether I can put the link in the chat. Yeah, please join us. Where's my chat? Hold on, give me a second to everyone. Yeah, there's the link for our next schedule as well. Thank you again, Afia. Truly appreciate you taking the time and giving such a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Have a great
you.
rest of
Thank
the day.
you.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.